It may be Friday the 13th, but today is your lucky day because we have the meta snapshot for the new patch, patch 14.24, and this one is going to be a 5-week patch, but Riot Games has said they are going to do a quick little B patch in like a week. But what should we play in that week? Well, we are coming down with the holiday season soon, so Family is going to be the top comp, followed by Dominator, Zoe, and Chem-Barons. But most importantly, whenever we look at every comp that we're going to see today, you always have to think of how to fit in the 6 costs, because those are new to the game. And just like being in the New York City subway, if you see something, say something. Well, if you see a 6 cost, just buy it and play it on your board, especially Victor. This guy's absolutely bonkers nuts, because turns out CCing the entire board and shredding and sundering them is a pretty good effect. Mel, very good for top 4ing because she just saves you a life. And then if you have a bunch of items to spare, Warwick is going to be pretty solid too. But getting back into the tier list, in the A tier, we have Ambessa Corki. I love this comp personally. Lots of things you could do with Corki this patch. Nocturne Akali reroll, Tristana reroll, Ziggs reroll, a bunch of 2 costs we could do, and then Heimerdinger Flex, Kogmaw Scar, but there's a new twist on this. You want to go Automata instead of Watchers. Bruiser Mundo still good. Enforcer Vi, Conqueror, Scrap Corki. Gangplank actually has spots in a lot of places too. Like both Corki and Gangplank are so flexible in a lot of teams, I think, as a damage dealer, but mainly as like a secondary or tertiary type of unit. Blackrose Flex got nerfed a bunch, but honestly still okay. You just can't spam it every game. Now you have to actually be smart about it. Emissary, Sorcerer, Nami, one of my favorite comps. And then we have Experiment Twitch and Pitfighter Vi to round everything else out. Pitfighter Vi is more for a failed family. You go for Vi instead. Similar to how people played Echo in the Ambusher comp from before if they did not get Camille. Speaking of Camille, she's pushed down to the B tier, maybe even C tier. She's pretty bad. They nerfed her too hard, but Visionary Heimerdinger, Heimer got nerfed also. Sorcerer actually might be playable, but it's a little difficult because you need to get an emblem and a legendary. Form Swapper Elise. If you hit Jace, it's good. Jace is pretty good right now in pretty much all these comps that could normally use him as a +1. Renata reroll. I'll add this if this becomes better, but right now it looks to be not necessarily a meme comp, but just not that great. And then we have Urgot and Maddie to round everything out. After that, we have the very special tier. These are all the things that are like trait augments, hero augments, or like why not both, build different things like that. But Menaces is absolutely bonkers busted right now. If you get this, try to take it if you have any bit of a playable spot. What could have been also very good, Unlikely Duo, pretty solid. And then why not both, actually pretty playable right now. But you need high econ to play this comp. Next, and just like the normal special, we have Martial Law, Reunion, Mad Chemist Singe. This one got nerfed a bunch. Brutal Revenge Rennie, Trolling Trundle, and Gloves Off Vander. And then the, I would say don't play or only play if you have like a 1 out of 100 game to play this. Crimson Pack Vladimir, Combat Medic Steb, Blade Dancer Aurelia, Trait Tracker, Betrayal, Sisters, Geniuses, and Built Different. If you are looking for comps to one trick, Scrap Corki and Rebel Zoe are going to be pretty good. And if you're a beginner, just play Family every single game. But before we get into the meta snapshot, just a quick word from our sponsor. If you love TFT, then you are going to love Duper. Duper is a social strategy war game that combines the best features of popular titles like TFT, Catan, Poker, and Among Us. You'll go head-to-head against 4 other players in a race for supremacy. To survive in Duper, you'll need to expand your army, strengthen your capital, form strategic alliances, and sometimes betray your opponents when they least expect it. Trade cards to build powerful units like tanks and forts, construct research centers to unlock other resources, and attack players' capitals to eliminate them from the game. Who you choose to trust and form alliances with is crucial if you want to survive and win, so choose your allies wisely. Play against other players worldwide in casual and ranked mode, or in a private game in custom mode to play with friends. In casual mode, you'll wager and earn Sparks, Duper's in-game currency, complete quests, and win games to earn Sparks, then sell them directly in the Duper store for real rewards. My favorite parts about Duper is the high replayability and the diplomacy aspect of the game. You don't have to relearn new heroes every season, so that means the knowledge you build up and learn each and every day stay with you for all of your future games. This makes it much easier to build up knowledge and strategies to make it easier to win the game and earn real money over time. With the diplomacy feature, we add a social aspect to the game via the chat feature. So if you actually go outside as a gamer, you could actually put those skills to the test in Duper. If you use my referral code in the description below, you'll receive the 100 Spark reward for free to use in the game. Play Duper for free right now in your browser and start earning real rewards. All right, let's get into how to play every single one of these comps. The first comp we're going to review is going to be the family build. I did a quick little short video on this. Some of you may have seen this already, but essentially what you want to do is play Violet reroll, combine it with Powder, Vander, Darius, and Draven. Whoever you get to 3-star, itemize them. It could be any of the other ones, but your main focus is going to be on Violet. And then you level up, put in as many pit fighters as possible. They did change the augment where you go for a 4-star Violet. It's nerfed a little bit, but honestly, it's not even required in this comp, even though it is nice. We could check out the data on this. We're going to look at Diamond Plus right now. 3-star Violet, 4.09, already very, very good for a 1-cost reroll. That's like very good territory for that. And 4-star Violet, 3.13. So it's like, if you only have the 3-star Violet, you're still going to do fine in most games. But I do want to mention, you want to make sure you have family emblems, because most people, they just play 3 family. But if you have a family emblem, that's where the real power is whenever you play this. Obviously, Pit Fighter emblem works really well too. But to do this, just do a 1-cost reroll and go for the comps you see in the images up here. And for items, you want to focus on all the frontline bruiser items on Violet, AP on Powder, attack speed on Draven, tank on Darius and Vander, and that should be that. If you want the full guide for this comp or any of the other comps we're going to be looking over today, head on over to the website bunnymuffins.lol/meta after you watch this video to reference whenever you play the game. And one more thing to note about the family reroll comp, my favorite part about this is that you can easily flex in any of the 6-cost units, because whenever you're power leveling up for pit fighters, you could always just go to the level where you are like 4 or 6 pit fighter instead of 5 or 7 when you could fit those, and just play a 6-cost instead. Right now, 6 costs are just super important for every single comp. Doesn't matter which one you get. Pretty much, if you don't get one, it kind of feels like it should be covered in your health insurance plan, but unfortunately, only some players get them. Next comp up we have is going to be Dominators. Dominators are really good right now. They're the best playable Blackrose version, because Blackrose got taken down a bunch. However, 4 to 6 Dominator with Silco carry is still really, really, really good. Works a bit better with 6 Dominator, especially if you get the emblem. That way you don't have to rely on hitting Mordekaiser. But of course, you could play 6 Dominators without the emblem as well. You just need to have a lot of gold. Focus on itemizing Silco with AP and a mana item, Mundo as your main tank, and then for all your leftovers, put them on the legendary units or Elise or Garen. A lot of people love just dropping like a Warmogs on Garen because it's just his best item, and it buffs up whoever you have on the left or right of him. Pretty simple comp to play, just like a standard fast 8 for this. Next build up we have is Rebel Zoe. By the way, for some of these, I added a new image format so we don't have like 2 images in a row like this, where you can kind of click the tabs. I'm not sure which one's better, so let me know down in the comments below which format you prefer. I plan on adding like even early game or like level 9, level 10 type of stuff. So hopefully it should be much better. I might have to change the colors a bit though. It's a bit too much orange for me, but I'm gonna deal with that another day. But Rebels are really, really good right now, because whenever a vertical comp is good without needing the emblem, obviously having Rebel emblem is extremely good. You know it's OP if it's still good without it. So we could check the data here already. Rebel 7 without the emblem is 4.27. No other vertical trig kind of acts like this, and you can pretty much play it from like most spots, because as long as you hit Jinx, you're going to be good to go. And if you econ correctly in the early game, if you only go Rebel when it's like the right time to go Rebel, if you slam items early, it could be very easy to do. And I think the secret tech for this comp is going to be building Rageblade on Zoe. Zoe actually works really, really, really well with attack speed items. If we look at all her best items with 7 Rebel activated, I'm going to change this to Diamond Plus. And essentially, if you go to items, toggle to just Zoe, you'll see that most of the generic AP items work pretty decently, but I really, really like the attack speed items. They pretty much all do really, really well. And you'd be surprised combining it with the Spear of Shojin, how much it actually activates her. But the reason why I like the Rageblade is that you can flex between this comp, the Kogmaw comp, and the Twitch comp whenever you build it. So whenever you're in the early game and you don't know what item to slam, slamming this isn't always such a bad thing. By the way, whenever you do play this comp, you really want like a red buff or a Morellonomicon on your team, because both Jinx and Zoe do a bunch of AoE damage and they're your main damage dealers. So always keep in mind to play some form of anti-heal whenever you are playing for them. After that, throw some tank items onto Alawi, and some people have asked me what the best Rebel emblem user is going to be, and Echo and Elise, things like that, they're going to be okay with it. Obviously, you put them on them before you get a legendary, but pretty much you want to put emblems on any 2-star legendary that you get in the late game. And if you have a 1-star legendary, it could be something like a Rumble. Rumble works really well because he's a Sentinel. You already played 2 Sentinel, and you don't need 4 Sentinel, but it is obviously good if you can get it. But he absolutely pops off with this comp because you also get scrap from Echo, so you could just put like a leftover component on him plus a full item and the Rebel emblem, and he will be smoking a lot of teams. But all in all, just standard leveling for this comp. You don't need to hit Jinx to get to 7 Rebel, but obviously she is your late game. You just play Vex before you hit that. And if you get a bunch of AD items, like obviously Ezreal isn't ideal, but you could use him as an item holder and sometimes even play Corki in this. He's going to be your artillerist and a scrap if you do end up playing Echo or Rumble. Of course, if you hit a 6 cost, play it instead of one of the extra non-Rebel units and you are going to be more than good to go. Next build up we have is Chem-Baron Cashout. Chem-Baron's absolutely bonkers right now. You absolutely need to get a 500 or higher Cashout, that way you get a perfect item. You can see a list of perfect items by going over to item stats and then just type in perfect over here. And then you automatically see that each of them do extremely well, and it's easy to get to that threshold because they buffed Chem-Barons. Obviously you need a little bit of a high roll or like a good spot to go for it still, but a lot of people are kind of wondering, should you go 3 Chem-Baron after the cash out, 4, 5, 6, or 7? And I'm going to tell you, it doesn't matter. Most of them do pretty well. I'd say do 3, 4, or 7 Chem-Baron. 7 Chem-Baron allows you to keep getting stuff, and you get a ton of max health, and then 3 Chem-Baron's good if you have a lot of random good units to put in, such as 6 costs, 5 costs, things like that. But there are a lot of boards that kind of fit this comp. We have the sample one over here, but if you just take out all the units that we have here, you generally just need to fit units that, so that's going to be Dominators. So if you keep Silco, Rennie, and Savika, which are like the more expensive Chem-Barons, all you have to do is add in a Dominator, a Pit Fighter, and a Bruiser. So whatever the expensive ones of those are, that's what you're going to add in. So like for Bruiser, you want Elise. For Dominators, you want Mordekaiser or Mundo. For Pit Fighter, get in like a Vi or a Gangplank. Gangplank's good because he complements a lot of other stuff. You could activate Scrap with Rumble or Echo, or he's like a form swapper for something like Jace or Elise that you already have on your board. But pretty much, if it's a 5 cost unit, you could throw it in, throw some random items on them. And again, if you have perfect items on one of your Chem-Baron units, you're going to be doing okay. The reason why these Chem-Baron units only have 2 items is because, again, you want to put the Chem-Baron items on them, so that's why it's kind of limited there. And the reason why you want to put your Chem-Baron items on the Chem-Barons is because they are the only units that can use them. Your other units cannot make use of them. Next build up we have is the A tiers. We're going to start off with Emissary, Corki, and Ambessa. This comp is really good with the augment bronze for life. I mean, just look at all the bronze traits that you run. It like goes off the screen. That's how many you run. And it's also really good because it plays around a lot of different 4 costs. So Corki and Ambessa are going to be the core of the comp. Add in the 4 Emissary, and then you kind of just fill in all the slots after that. Generally, you want Quickstriker for Ambessa, so you add in something like Twist of Fate. Sorcerer for Nami is something like Swain, since you have Form Swapper from Swain, and he gives Conqueror to your Ambessa. You might as well play like a Gangplank for more Form Swapper. And then Vi is decent because you get Pit Fighter from Gangplank and Enforcer from Twisted Fate. Garen's going to be the main tank though. Just put in between whoever you have in the front line. Ambessa gets all the melee frontline items. Corki gets IE, a component, plus like some supportish item, maybe like a Last Whisper or a red buff. He's essentially going to be Karma from last set if anyone played her. He's just like the support unit 4 cost. Obviously, he still does like a little bit of damage, but he's like a very solid secondary carry in a lot of different teams. But in order to play this comp, you need to actually hit 4 emissaries, so make sure you have like the health pool or the econ to do so, because getting to level 8 and hitting like 2 specific 4 costs, plus you want like 4 total, is a pretty expensive comp. So this isn't a comp I would necessarily go every game. Maybe if you're playing Scrap Corki and you see a bunch of the other emissary units, then you swap into Emissary Corki, because I think this version is a bit better than Scrap Corki. For the next comp, I want you to guess what it is. I'll give you a hint. What CPU cooler do I use? I use the Noctua cooler, so we're gonna go with some Quickstriker Nocturne. And for him, you just want to do a 2 cost reroll. You could pick up Akali if you want. 3 costs are pretty solid in this comp as well. A lot of people go for like Twisted Fate and Blitzcrank. I'd say when you play this comp, obviously you want Nocturne 3, so no matter what you go for him. If you see Akali's, go for her. If not, you can skip her. And then for Twist of Fate, again, if you see a lot of him, go for him 3-star. If not, skip him. Same for Blitzcrank. And if you have backline AP items, drop them on Twist of Fate. If you have frontline AP items, put them on Akali, and if you have tank items, put them on Blitzcrank. But all in all, you just want to run 4 Quickstriker, 4 Automata, and if you are lucky enough to get to 6 Automata, definitely autoplay that because that is an absolutely bonkers busted trait. Probably one of the best in the meta right now. For items for Nocturne, I think Quicksilver is probably his most important, followed by some healing item, and then Titans is good just to kind of stack up. But he could use a lot of different stuff. Some people like Edge of Night more. If you get the Edge of Night augment, obviously you drop that in over the Quicksilver. That one's extremely, extremely good. Healing augments are really good. Any support items are really good. And then if you want to go for everything 3-star, maybe like an Econ augment would be pretty nice too. So a lot of different options for augments in this comp, couple of different options for items, like obviously any generic frontline item will do. And in general, you could even argue that item augments would be good if you're able to 3-star everything, because you obviously want items on 3-starred units. So it's a bit of a balance. If you are able to get a lot of 3-stars, then you want item augments. If you're not able to, then you want stuff such as combat augments or like radiant items, Ornn items, things like that. But pretty easy to play 2-cost comp, nothing too crazy there. Next build up we have is Tristana Reroll. There are 2 versions of this. It's the Emissary version and the Sentinel version. Both versions are good, it just really depends on what you hit. The default one is going to be the Sentinel version because you don't need to rely on hitting the other Emissary units. However, I will say that I think the Emissary version is a bit better if you are able to swap into it. The reason why is because you get to just play a lot better units, like Garen's really good. The whole Emissary buff in general is just pretty solid. If you do get Artillerist emblem, you could drop it on Ambessa, which is really, really nice. And the Sentinel version, unless you get 3-star Leona, 3-star Rel, one or the other to be your main tank, it's not really that worth to play these like dog units. But it's not every game where you're able to actually hit all these 4-cost units, especially if you do a 2-cost reroll. If you get Urgot 3, you could itemize him too. Sometimes I just like dropping a Thieves Gloves on him. I think that'd be pretty nice, just because you don't want to invest too much into him. I'd much rather have like a Corki, for example, with a couple of my extra items. But augments you want for this, anything that gives swords is really good. The Runon's Hurricane one isn't that bad. Artillerist stuff, you could drop it on Ambessa if you want to itemize her. And then obviously like reroll augments are going to be good for reroll comps. For items on Tristana, I think IE is the only like really, really good one. After that, you could kind of build anything. I like the Rage Blade. Some people aren't that big of a fan of it. And then third damage item, literally anything can slot in there. Make sure you have some sort of anti-heal on your team and armor pen as well. If you do get it, I would drop it on Corki. But if you don't have enough items, just put the Last Whisper on your Tristana. You could also play like an Even Shroud in your front line on either like Leona, Rel, Garen, or like a Sunfire Cape on them too instead of the red buff Last Whisper. So you have a couple of different options there. By the way, a bunch of people have asked me about like TFT coaching, and I am going to be opening up like a free coaching thing for like one of your games, and you'll also be featured in one of my videos. If I do end up picking your game, all you have to do is submit your VOD. The link is in the Discord or in the YouTube description below. And essentially, if everyone remembers my Unranked to Diamond series, where I review one game at each rating, the games that I review could be yours if you submit your videos in the link. Next one up we have is Dominator Ziggs. This is one of the new comps, another 2-cost reroll, a couple of different 2-cost reroll. It's actually pretty funny because Camille is pretty dead, but a bunch of new ones rose up, like Nocturne rose up, Akali's part of Nocturne, Vander's part of family, he doesn't count. Some people are playing Renata, Tristana's definitely an option, and then people are also playing Ziggs. Ziggs does have 2 versions. You can play him with the emblem or without the emblem. I have both comps listed out here. Pretty much you just follow the standard Dominator board and add in Blackrose, but instead of doing Silco carry, you do Ziggs carry. And you obviously only go for this if you are uncontested and have a lot of copies of Ziggs. For items on Ziggs, I like just the standard mana item, Nashor's plus AP item. In this case, it's going to be Jeweled Gauntlet. Some people like going full AP on it by getting like an Archangels, but I feel like he already has a built-in Archangels based on the way Dominators work. Pretty much whenever Dominators cast, based on how much mana they spent, they gain a % of it in AP. So I feel like he already has a built-in Archangels, so getting crit I think is a little bit more worth it. Other items to consider on Ziggs is like a red buff or a Morellonomicon, because he does hit a bunch of different units, so getting the anti-heal effect on a bunch of different people, pretty useful stuff. For tanks, I like having Blitzcrank 3-star. but if you're not able to get Blitzcrank 3, getting a Mundo 2 is going to be solid enough. For other units in the backline, you could itemize either a 3-star Cassio with Static Shiv and a bunch of other AP items, or if you don't get her, you could just play around with a 2-star Silco once you get him. So overall, it's very similar to the other Dominator comp. You just do a reroll instead of going for Fast 8 with Silco 2. And both options, very, very viable. Next comp up, we have a nerfed comp. We have Heimerdinger Flex, but honestly, it's still good because Jace got buffed. So if you're able to hit Jace, the comp is going to be good. You could do 5 Academy or 6 Sentinel, or do a mix of the two depending on whether you get emblems or not. So getting Sentinel emblems, Academy emblems are both really good in this comp. You could argue even Visionary also. It's pretty easy to fit in Malzahar that way too. But in terms of playing the comp, not much has changed since the last patch. You just want to play around the Heimerdinger, get AP items on him, and your late game is going to be a bit better with Jace and less reliant on Malzahar. But Malzahar is obviously still going to be good. Next build up we have is Kogmaw and Scar reroll. This build has a new version. So before we played the Watcher or Firelight version, depending on what units we were hitting before, but nowadays you want to play the Automata version, where you get the emblem, drop it on your Scar, play all the Automata units. Obviously you have to hit Malzahar, so it's a little bit tricky before you get that. Just play 4 until you do, and then play around 3-star Kogmaw, Blitzcrank, and Scar depending on who you're hitting that game. I like putting the main tank items on Blitzcrank, Warmogs on Garen, and then off-tank items onto the Scar, like the support items. And then Kogmaw, same build as before, tons of attack speed. If you get Gambler's Blade on Kogmaw, it's still like an autoplay. So even though it did get nerfed, I think like all versions of Kogmaw are still really good if you get Gambler's Blade. Like, yeah, look, Watcher, 6 Watcher is still 3.47. Automata, if you get to 6, like 2.46, like holy cow. That's crazy stuff there, right? So if you do get that augment to get the item, definitely go for it and do not look back. Next build up we have is Bruiser Mundo. Twitch, he's probably the worst forecast right now. I can't think of other ones. There might be one other one that I'm forgetting, but if you get the Bruiser emblem and drop it on Mundo, 6 Bruiser with Twitch is really good because it naturally gives you Experiment. Mundo becomes an absolute monster with the emblem, and obviously Twitch is going to be the primary carry for that. So if you do get it, play 6 Bruiser, Giga Tank items on Mundo, none of the support item nonsense on him or like the utility items on him. You want like full-on Warmogs, D-Claw, Bramble. Bramble did get buffed, so if there's a lot of attack damage in your game, definitely well worth it to go for. And then on your Twitch, you definitely want the red buff because you have a stall comp essentially with this beefy front line. Rageblade to stack up, and then just any third damage item, Deathblade or Infinity Edge. And that's more than enough to win a bunch of games. For like other units to itemize, you could put mana items onto Elise, such as like Adaptive Helm, Protector's Vow. If you have AP items, drop them on Silco. If you have Caitlyn 2-star, like she's going to be pretty solid as well. Play Zeri until you get Caitlyn. And you essentially just want a fast 8 for this build. The early game's really easy to play. You could use Maddie as an item holder. You could also use Tristana or Artillerist as an item holder. You could even use like Draven Pit Fighters as an item holder until you get your Twitch. So you're not like tunnel visioned into like only playing snipers, for example, just because you are playing Twitch as a sniper later on. Lots of different things kind of work, and overall very solid comp if you do get the emblem. Next one up, speaking of emblems, we have Enforcer, Vi, and Caitlyn. I would only play Enforcer with the emblem. Don't bother without it. I'm not saying it's horrible because Vi did get buffed a bit, but it's not enough to like just hard force it from the beginning with like no emblem to go with it. They're just better comps to play if your strategy does revolve just like hard forcing one comp at the start every single game. But if you do get the emblem early on, you can force this. Twisted Fate is a great item holder in the mid game after his recent buffs. He's also great if you are playing Enforcers. Let's say you pick the augment early to give you an emblem, and then you have like perfect items for Vi in the beginning of the game, good items for the backline if you ever do end up getting Caitlyn. But then all of a sudden on Wolf Camp, Mortdog decides to give you 3 rods or something like that. It's okay, don't fret. Twisted Fate can handle it. He'll use those items like not as well as other units can use items, but good enough to not completely grief your game. You could also get a bunch of rods if you take augments such as Magic Dice. I forget what the other one is. There's a prismatic one that does something very similar. I fell for that trap too. Pro tip, don't take those augments if you're hard forcing a comp. It's really risky. But in this case, if you get a ton of rods, like Twisted Fate can definitely use them and not completely suck. But overall, like the comp's tricky to play because you need an emblem and you also need to get Caitlyn, which is a legendary. So it revolves around like high rolling a little bit or having like an extremely good early game. So if you see the emblem, don't just take it and hard force it. You want to make sure you actually have Enforcer units to win streak early on with. That way you're able to build a big economy and take some losses if you are not able to hit Caitlyn right away. But overall, pretty solid comp because Vi got buffed. Same with Ambessa, which people normally play Ambessa as like a +1 because she gives Quickstriker and she gets an Emissary +1, which is definitely very welcome. Next build up we have is Conqueror. Conqueror also got buffed, but you only play this if you get an insane start in the early game, either like 2-star Darius, 2-star Draven with Conqueror emblem at the start, like something ridiculous like that. I wouldn't just play this naked, but I mean, it's a free country, you could do whatever you want. Gangplank is actually pretty solid in this. So if you want to do like a Conqueror build with like Swain and Gangplank reroll, it could work out pretty decently as long as you had the early game to get a big econ to kind of play it. But the main carry in most cases is going to be Ambessa. What I like doing is having Gangplank as the Conqueror emblem holder and then switch it over to a legendary later on. So pretty much you just run Gangplank, throw whatever items you have on him, Ambessa main carry of course, but then later on, you could item remove it if you get a Mordekaiser, Rumble, other legendaries, or even a 6 cost, put the Conqueror emblem on them, and be more than good to go. Conqueror emblem definitely makes the comp a lot stronger, but it's not 100% required, as long as you could hit Mordekaiser in a reasonable way. For Anomaly, I normally do Ambessa because she's going to be the main carry for most of the game. So if you hit a legendary and you have Conqueror emblem to put on them, such as like Rumble, then obviously go for it. If you get an early Mordekaiser, he doesn't need the emblem obviously because he's already a Conqueror. Sometimes you could put the Anomaly on him too if you have items. But this is pretty much just like a snowball comp. Only play this if you can actually snowball in the early game. Next build up we have is Scrap Corki. If you have no idea what to do and you want to just hard force one comp every single game, playing Corki only isn't a bad idea. You could play Scrap Corki, you could play Corki Emissary, so you have 2 different options there. And pretty much scrap units can use almost whatever items you want, and they could flex around with a lot of different units because 6 scrap, they have a lot of good complementary units. For example, you have built-in ambushers with Echo and Powder. They're both scrap units. You could hit 6 scrap without relying on a legendary. You could play Ziggs instead of Rumble. And if you do end up hitting Rumble, you could play stuff like Alawi, which is a very solid 4-cost unit. Since you have Trundle, you could play Elise, and before that, you could play Rennie, which has very good CC. In the backline, for Artillerists, you could play Tristana. Tristana gives you the Emissary buff as well, so she is like the perfect complement to Corki. And then lastly, you also have Gangplank for your mid-game. The mid-game is something that a lot of beginner players underrate, and having a 2-star 3 cost in like stage 4, he often beats a lot of 1-star 4 costs in a lot of those fights. So don't sleep on Gangplank. He might not be like this giga late game carry as like a 2-star, but he definitely gets you out of a lot of tough spots. Speaking of Gangplank, you could also flex a unit like Jace, and of course any of the 6 costs you could easily fit into your Corki build. So if you want to do like a soft flex, what I mean by that is like just hard forcing scrap every game, but like flexing the extra units. This is definitely a good option to go for that. And it's also like a decent comp. It's not the best comp. It is pretty low in the A tier, but despite all that, if you really master scrap and like play it every game and know all the ins and outs of it, because again, you don't need perfect items because you could just throw a random component on all your scrap units, you'll end up like knowing all the little tricks as you play and get more experience with it, that even though you're hard forcing one comp, you'll still be able to outplay a lot of different people who are like doing pure flex, for example. Next build up we have is going to be Form Swapper, Gangplank, and Swain. Since Jace got buffed, I really like a lot of the different Form Swapper comps, but of course it relies on hitting Jace, and that doesn't happen all the time because again, he's a legendary unit. But if you have high econ, you can kind of go for this 3-star Gangplank, 3-star Swain. No one ever got mad about that before. And the power between 2 Form Swapper and 4 Form Swapper is absolutely astronomical. So in the late game, once you do hit the Jace, it becomes extremely good. Like sometimes I played 4 Form Swapper and like 2-star Gangplank itemized with 4 forms absolutely demolishes people still. He's like higher DPS than some 2-star legendaries that I had on my board as a 2-star 3 cost. Like that's how good the buff is, so definitely look out for that. But obviously like Jace gonna be a monster as well. Next build up we have is Blackrose Flex. Yeah, dropped a lot. It went from the best comp in the game, second best depending on who you ask, because some people thought Camille was the best, and it's now low A tier with its best version being the Dominator version. The Heimerdinger one and Malzahar one is still playable, same with the Elise one, but they're definitely much better options to go for. The Zoe one's good too, but the thing is all the Rebel players are taking your Zoe, so it's going to be hard to hit this last version. But overall, if you are able to get Blackrose upgrades very easily, you could still flex around a bunch of different carries in the later parts of the game, and the units themselves are still good. It's just like, as a whole, it obviously is a bit weaker, but if you hit the units for free, it's going to be good. If you hard force it, you're going to have a bad time because it's not OP anymore. Luckily, if you are looking to hard force some comps, like probably like Rebels or like the Scrap Corki, probably a bit of a better option. But if you get a bunch of Blackrose upgrades at the start of the game, maybe like an early 3 Blackrose, and then play around AP items, like definitely still very viable. Next build up we have is Emissary, Sorcerer, Nami. This is going to be a 3-cost reroll build, but it's a bit rare to play. I'd play this maybe only 1 game in a patch, I think. Some people, I've seen them play it a bit more, but for my taste, I don't want to hard force 3-cost reroll every game, especially when I need to find 4 Emissary, which is pretty difficult to do because Garen and Ambessa, for some reason, when you don't want them, they show up in your shop all the time. When you do want them, they all of a sudden disappear. So it's a bit risky of a comp to play. If you have like maybe 4 Namis, like let's say you have a 2-star Nami already, you're using her as an item holder for playing Zoe, for example, and then all of a sudden you see in your next shop like a Garen and another Nami, like you could consider going for this build. Those are the times where I'm like, you know what, maybe I will go for the Nami 3. And I have the Garen already, so I just need to find Ambessa. But unless you can get to 4 Emissary, I don't really like this comp that much. So you need a bit of experience to play this comp in the games where you do not hit. Which again is why this comp is a bit lower on the list, even though I think it is very strong if you do manage to hit everything. And you have a bunch of different options. You could do frontline Swain, you could do backline Swain, you could play Gangplank, you could take out Gangplank. There are actually a bunch of different versions of this build, but I like this one a lot because you have a lot of different options for item holders. Like AD items go on Gangplank, AP goes on Nami, tank items go on Swain, like utility and Warmogs go on Garen. So there's always someone to do something with, which is kind of why I like this version over the other ones, but definitely more than one way to play Emissary. Next build up we have is Experiment Twitch. Twitch is going to be your last case scenario 4 costs. He is the worst one, I think. The 5 experiment build, they did buff it a little bit in the sense that you can now get experiment emblem from augments. Before they did not have that option. So definitely has some viability, but I'd really only play this if I get like a really good spot for it. The same rules apply for itemization though as the Bruiser build. You want pure tank items on Mundo. You want like red buff Rageblade on your Twitch. Getting something like category 5 is also really useful on Twitch. I think that could be a way to just hard force a comp if you get that augment on stage 2. And then for other units to itemize, you could think of using like one of the Dominators, such as like Mordekaiser. Sometimes people play Silco in the back. Some people play Corki because you get Artiller, some Urgots. So lots of different ways to flex around this build. I'll show you what they can look like in this video. So instead of this, Dominator actually isn't that important for Mundo. The reason why is because if you look at Dominator trait, it is something that gives Dominators a shield for 15 seconds, and whenever you cast, they gain stacking AP based on mana spent. What does Mundo want? He wants like tank stats, right? But a shield at the start of the fight is only like 350. I'm not saying it's bad. Like obviously if someone gives me a 350 shield, I'm gonna take it every time, right? But is it worth a unit? Would you rather run a Victor who stuns the entire board and armor pens everyone? Yes, I would rather have a Victor. So you don't need to have Dominator in there. And also if you do, you could also use something like Silco if you have AP items. If you want to run, if you have a bunch of AD items, you could run something like Corki instead of Silco. Maybe put like a Last Whisper on him, another IE, and then maybe like one random component. Some people run Scrap with this build by playing Gangplank. So if you do end up playing Gangplank, you could put a sword on Corki. Gangplank gives Pit Fighter, but it's honestly not that important because it's on your Urgot. So that's why I don't really like this version as much. But of course you could always just put 3 full items on your Corki as well. Putting something like a Giant Slayer, Runons, things like that. But the most important thing when playing this comp is getting to level 9 and getting a 6 cost in if you can. But if you don't get a 6 cost, then like a Dominator will do just fine. Next build up we have is Pit Fighter Vi. If you fail doing family reroll, Pit Fighter Vi is a good option to kind of fall back on. You definitely want the Pit Fighter emblem. You know how people last patch, they were playing Camille, and then if they failed to hit Camille, they play around Echo? You could do the same thing, same exact playstyle, but instead use Vi instead of Echo. And Vi did get buffed a bunch, so she is actually pretty solid now. I did not like this build in the last patch, but since it got buffed, things changed a bit. And the good news is that all the Pit Fighters can do some form of carrying, so item augments are really, really good in this comp because literally all of them can use them. Like Savika's really good, Gangplank can use it, lots of different options there. And of course, whoever has your Pit Fighter emblem can also use a bunch of items, but very solid comp if you have not tried it yet, but it is a bit situational. I wouldn't just like hard force this as my first choice. This is definitely like a good safety school if you fail to get family reroll going. I guess you could look at it this way. If you don't get Violet 4, like you have to grow up, turn into Vi, and yeah, give up on Violet. But I mean, you could still play her because she's a Pit Fighter. Now onto the B tier. Visionary Heimer, like, yeah, not that great. Better Heimer versions out there. Andy got nerfed. Camille Smeech, pretty awful. Like, I probably wouldn't play this. It just got nerfed way too hard. Sorcerer Zoe, it's pretty much like Enforcer because you need an emblem and you need to hit a legendary to get to 8, but it's just a bit worse than Enforcer, so if you can do it, like, great, but a lot of people can't get both an emblem and a legendary in the same game. The one you're looking for here is LeBlanc, so unless you have, like, insane econ with Sorcerer emblem early and you're win streaking, like, I wouldn't really try to go for this, but if you do, then it is really good. Form Swapper Elise, if you get 4 Form Swapper, like 4 Form Swapper is always going to be very solid, so you just need to play around any carry you can get. So normally I'd play around like Gangplank or Swain 3-star, but if you don't get them and you get an early Jace, you play around Elise and Jace instead, so this is one way to kind of do it. And then, yeah, that's going to be that for the main comps. For the special comps, like, we're going to go over the very special tier. Menaces, absolutely great because it's a Dominator comp, and Dominators are just really, really good right now. So this comp turns Powder into a Dominator, or this augment does, so you actually get to 6 Dominators here instead of just 5. And you just play around Powder 3 plus Silco, and then you could play like Echo if you want, or itemize like some of the other Dominator units. You could also combine it with like Ziggs reroll if you do manage to get a lot of him as you're rolling for Powder. But the comp is just performing absolutely bonkers right now. Like, sometimes people ask me, like, why is a comp good? Sometimes it's just because the numbers are really, really good. Like, if we type in Menaces right now, 3.91, that's like almost unheard of. Let's check like more elos. Like, yeah, pretty much across everything, it's like pretty good. Oddly enough, the worse elo you get, the worse the comp becomes. Interesting, but it's really, really good. That's all you really have to know about it. Itemize your Powder and whoever is your main tank. Silco items, like, they're good because you're playing a ton of Dominators, but the trait augment Menaces doesn't actually buff Silco, it only buffs Powder. But one little fancy thing you can do is type in Menaces in teamfight.lol, go to like Stats Explorer, and then you can see exactly what items do well in this comp. You could put in Powder and Silco, maybe changes to like Diamond, maybe Emerald Plus to get a bigger sample size, and then click on items, type in whoever you're looking for. Like, I think Powder is going to be more important here. And like Shojin, Static Shiv, Jeweled Gauntlet people build a lot, doesn't perform that great because she is an ambusher. You get crit from Echo already, so I don't know why people are building Jeweled Gauntlet on Powder because you already get the effect of Jeweled Gauntlet. Nasher's Tooth, good. Like, any AP item is probably going to be good on her. You just slam whatever you have. And then on Silco, just like classic Silco build, like, it doesn't really matter that much, right? Like, he uses pretty much any AP item that we've built since set 1 for the past 5 or 6 years. And then tank items on your Mundo. Pretty solid stuff. Next build up we have is What Could Have Been. This is Vander and Silco. Pretty much what it does is Vander gains max health whenever Silco casts, and Silco gains permanent AP whenever Vander dies. So you just want to get Silco to cast a lot, and Dominators again are just OP right now. That's why like all the Silco trade augments are doing really, really well. But yeah, just play a board similar to this, or you go 6 Dominator, like anything really works there. Unlikely duo Jinx and Savika. Only play this comp if you have like a champion duplicator or you have like copies of Savika or Jinx already, because getting them to 2-star is absolutely crucial for this. Lots of different boards to play with this. You could play this from a Rebel game and just go like 7 Rebels plus like a random Savika, definitely very possible. Or you could do something like this with like a bunch of Sentinels up front as your front line. Makes perfect sense to play with Jinx. And I think most people are using this just to get a free Jinx when you are playing Rebels, because like, when is that ever a bad thing? And then you just run a random Savika because Rebels can flex a lot of different units. You could even put the Rebel emblem, if you have it, onto Savika. Why not both Gangplank and Swain? Like, again, form swappers, you know how much I love form swappers. They're really good. And if you can get them to 3-star with this augment, it's actually pretty good again. Before it kind of sucked, but now it got better. So definitely very viable. Run 2 Gangplanks, 2 Swains, and then a bunch of other random stuff. You could also play for 4 Form Swapper, obviously, but not mandatory and hard to get because you need to get a Jace, which is a legendary unit. Stuff that's okay is Martial Law, Ambessa Caitlyn, Reunion Echo Vi, Mad Scientist Singe. They got nerfed a bunch, but this is still like the best hero augment in my opinion. Brutal Revenge Rennie, okay, but like this one doesn't show up that much. I haven't seen it personally in any of my games. Even when I watch other people play, I rarely see it. Trolling Trundle, okay, not the best. Gloves Off Vander, okay, not the best. And then in the not special tier, like don't play these. Before we go back into the summary, I actually have a bonus comp for you. I changed my mind in the middle, and I think we should include the Renata reroll. There are two versions that you could play with this. You could play it with 4 Sentinel, 4 Visionary. You could also add in Chem-Baron as well if you're able to fit it. You pretty much just play 2 Sentinel, and then when you level up, you play 4 Sentinel. Both work, obviously. It just depends if you are able to use the Chem-Baron or not. But pretty much the build is Renata, Rel, and Leona. Going to be pretty key focuses. And obviously Renata main item holder because the comp's named after her. And then whichever tank you 3-star in the front, they're going to hold all your tank items. Doesn't really matter who it is too much. Obviously, Rel is going to be preferred because she is a visionary as well. I mean, she has like all the traits in the comp, right? But for Renata, just Shojin, standard AP in the back. Make sure to surround her because she like throws 2 things out. It kind of hits other units, and just do a 2-cost reroll there. Again, if you want more details, website is bunnymuffins.lol. Updating this like pretty much whenever I can, like almost every day sometimes. But just to summarize, at the top, we have the way I'm going to approach the patch, which is pray I get Family or Chem-Baron opener. If not, get +1 Automata, Enforcer, Rebel, Dominator, Bruiser, or Conqueror and hard force that comp. If I get a reroll opener, like Tristana, Nocturne, Ziggs, if uncontested, maybe I should add Renata in here too. And then if I don't get any of these options, like I'm just going to default to AD, maybe some Corki build. Ideally not Twitch, but you know, you got to do what you got to do sometimes. And now we are going to go into the comment of the week. So again, I've been making a bigger effort of answering all questions in the comment section. So if you are curious about something, definitely leave a question there. I try to get as many as I can. And if your question is good, you get to be featured in the video next Friday. First one is starting to think your videos are shit, sitting here just losing, following what you say. I just responded, that's too bad, I'll try to improve. And then later on he says, played more matches and won most of them, you're off the hook. This is not a healthy way to approach TFT. Like whether you win or lose after you watch a guide doesn't really have that much bearing of the guide because there is RNG in this game, and odds are something happened in your game. You probably could have done it differently. No amount of guide watching is going to change that. But also, if you are going to leave a negative comment, I do not mind negative comments, but it should be something specific on something to improve on. So I guess for this one, the one I need to look at is I'm going to try to make these guides more easy to follow because that seems to be the issue over there. But I'd say overall, not a healthy way to approach the game on whether you win or lose. That's how you like judge everything. Unless the sample size is very, very big. But if your sample size is just like 3 to 5 games, probably not going to be ideal. And then the other one is going to be asking about Thieves Gloves, like who they should put Thieves Gloves on. So normally you put Thieves Gloves on a secondary damage dealer or just any secondary like unit that you're playing in your team. It could be a secondary tank as well. But for example, if you're playing like the Rebel comp without the emblem, who should use Thieves Gloves here? Probably going to be Echo, right? He's like a frontline unit. Frontline units generally use Thieves Gloves a bit better. And he's just like a 4-cost, right? Like you wouldn't put it on Akali even though she's a Rebel because she's a 2-cost unit. So here I'd probably put it on Echo with the emblem. If you have it on Rumble, then you put it on Echo still. If you have the Rebel emblem on your Echo, well then just put it on whatever like frontline random legendary that you get that game, or something like Elise if you're running her with Bruiser with set. If you're running Emissary, Corki, and Ambessa, Ambessa is a pretty good candidate for Thieves Glove. Sometimes you don't get 9 items for your whole team because that takes like a lot of items. You definitely need item augments to get up to that number. And building the Thieves Gloves just allows you to focus under Corki and Garen. Alternatively, if you do get enough items for your Ambessa, you could put the TG on Vi. So pretty much like 4-cost units in the front line, those are going to be the best candidates for it. But if you have like a 2-star legendary in the back line, like Thieves Glove is great on them too. So lots of different options there. Kind of is dependent on what's happening in your game, but hopefully that kind of helps people out a little bit. So again, leave your questions down below. Also, if you want your whole game reviewed, check out the link in the description. And also, thanks again to the sponsor of this video, Duper. That's going to be it from me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.